Thank you for plugging into this Family Life News podcast, streaming issues-driven, family-focused news.
Welcome back to another edition of Real Answers with Christopher Anderson. Wednesdays, during the Noon Report, we tackle the tough topics facing today's families with licensed mental health counselor Christopher Anderson. And today, with the upcoming potentially tumultuous midterm elections in November, we are discussing how to get ready and how to engage the political process in a godly manner, Chris.
Yeah, absolutely, Brandon. And, we're going to be discussing, I think, some common misapplication of some scriptural principles here that I think oftentimes people use as an excuse to help avoid being involved in the political process. But I think people need to understand they need to get their voices heard.
So let's get right to it. With all the division, which definitely does not seem to be improving, what can we do to not get overly frustrated with the condition of our nation?
This is a tough question, but it's one with some clear biblical guidance, I think, and it's so incredibly basic to our conversation today. We're not to draw our hope from what we're seeing in this world, but from God and His Word. And that's a pretty clear picture and a clear command in Scripture. We're living in a fallen world with imperfect people trying to call the shots. And with the way things are going these days, it's easy for us to take up sides. But it's so important to remember that regardless of the political side that you see yourself on, the government cannot save us. That can only happen as God works all things out for the good of those who believe in Him.
So how can we as Christians make sure that we're not getting too caught up in the rhetoric and look too much like the world?
That's a really good question, Brandon, and it's not easy at times. And I think that one of the best things you can do is make sure you're staying tight with your Christian friends and others who can help you on your journey of faith. Make sure you're going to church regularly, you belong to a Bible-believing church, and one that's holding firm to the unchanging truths of the Bible. Now, I might ruffle some feathers here, but if your church has become too contemporary with respect to social views and the current trends of society, you might want to reevaluate where you are attending church. Make sure you're having a balanced discussion with your friends, maintaining open channels of communication with your friends that don't necessarily share your views. I mean, that's an opportunity to not only share your faith, but also to discuss critical issues of the day. And I get it. This is sometimes easier said than done, but honestly, how else are we going to be able to shine God's light on tough topics? I know there's a very popular quote, I hear it from a lot of folks, from St. Francis of Assisi, that honestly, I believe is oftentimes used as an excuse to not speak up when it's time to speak up. And that quote says, share the gospel always, use words if necessary. Now, of course, while that is correct, and I think that is an accurate statement, I think a lot of folks will use that quote as a way to avoid getting in tough conversations, okay? And people will say, well, I don't like conflict. Good. Don't ever start liking conflict. The minute you start liking conflict is the minute you become a bully. So don't start liking conflict, but know how to engage in conversations, which can be kind of tough. It's good exercise. It's really good. And I think it's more important to remember also to be careful how you say things. I'd rather quote this, saying, it's not always what you say as much as how you say it. And also, try to stay up to date with Christian organizations that are taking an active role in politics so you can know what efforts are being made to have our voices heard and so you can stay up on the current trends.
What about social media? I know we've spoken often about that, and it's often negative impact on political relations.
That is absolutely correct. Honestly, I've scaled back my own social media engagement, particularly during these times of years when we have an upcoming important election that's approaching. We have to choose how we engage social media. It's neither a good thing nor it's a bad thing in and of itself. And I've said it not only here on the air several times before, I'll say it again. I've been guilty of overdoing it myself on social media when it comes to politics, posting things that really don't help the cause of Christ. And I've had to eat my own words and also apologize to folks for that at times. But again, that is a choice. If you're too worked up, feeling overly stressed and anxious, not only about politics, but anything, oftentimes check your social media habits. And I'll bet you more often than not, you'll be able to see how social media has contributed to anxiety and other concerns you might be having.
Any final thoughts?
Brandon, it's not only biblical to be involved in our culture, it's also our responsibility as citizens of the United States. Get out and vote. Make your voices heard. Don't hesitate to look up what your political candidates stand for and what they believe. because quite honestly, that'll then help you to make an informed decision. And also, don't hesitate to send your elected officials emails or written letters, or even set appointments to speak with them or an official from their office on the phone. I'll tell you what, I have done that many times myself on several different issues, and it's also our right to do that. They are representing us in office. But remember, in all correspondences, it's not so much what you're saying, it's how you're saying it. Keep it classy, keep it godly, get your voices heard.
Well, you've been listening to another edition of Real Answers with Christopher Anderson. It airs Wednesdays during the Noon Report. We tackle the tough topics facing today's families with Christian counselor Christopher Anderson.